except for I went to Costco, supposed to go to my grandmother's, and I'm like legit 5 minutes from my house, and like there's closed roads everywhere. So, yeah, so like the title says, I think contractors and just business owners in general, I think they need a new mindset. What I see all the time, and it's easy to like feel this way, like honestly, is that there's such a scarcity mindset, especially now. Like it's getting bad out there. People lack of money, and I've talked about it before. Like, I feel as though people are extra broke now because they were getting a few $100 extra a month, and then that got taken away, and then they had then the inflation. So it's like everyone's pretty much in a hole like $800 to $900. Not everyone, but the people that had the extra few $100 a month for free, and then went out and bought a car. So that's where we're at. But yeah, like everyone, most of the contractors. What's funny to see is that a lot of the fence companies, a lot of them are very, territorial. But when I started talking to landscapers, like it was just a different situation. I think it's just because there's so much additional work for landscapers. Now, obviously, it's not high ticket items a lot of the time. Well, there is like pavers and that kind of thing, but the vast majority of the work is like the lawn care and stuff like that. And then from there, they start building their business. But they're not really encouraging on other people because they got the lawn care customers. And then once they start the pavers and the decks and everything else, well, they have their core customers already just because those people already know, like, and trust them, know what kind of work they do, that kind of thing, and they know they're going to show up on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. So modelers and stuff like that as well. And because we're not going into low ticket items, we're relying on that lead to book a job. But like for us, like the problem is, and I always wondered why landscapers, for the longest time, I'm like, how, like they're cutting lawns. Like, how can you have like this nice ass truck and everything else? I see the pictures. Like, what am I doing wrong? Right. And like, it really boils down to one thing, and I might be wrong, but it comes down to reoccurring revenue, right? This is the holy grail for any kind of business. Look at the things like all the software and everything else. 10 years ago, obviously the software wasn't where it needed to be today, compared to today for businesses and stuff like that. But it used to be, they would charge, a few grand or whatever it happened to be, and that was the end of it. Well, everything now is reoccurring revenue. Like it's not a few $1,000s, it's $50 a month, $100 a month, $200 a month. Well, why would they do this? Well, because we'd rather spend $100 a month on our software, which is $1,200, knowing that we're going to use this stupid thing for like the next 10, 20, 30 years or whatever, how long, however long. Well, that $200 or, $100 a month, in 10 years becomes $12,000. Well, originally you would have only paid like 1,500, maybe $1,000 for the program, but yet the max you would have spent, like now you're paying on a yearly basis, right? And like they do it because it's so profitable, right? Then the other thing with this, besides being extremely profitable, and the reason why it's extremely profitable is because it takes so much time, money, and effort to bring on a new customer. But if you can bring on that new customer and get your foot in the door for something small like lawn care, then you can keep on selling them using things I talked about, like email marketing and things like that. Plus, they're showing up to this customer's house, so they literally can print out a flyer and just hand it to the customer and be like, "Yo, we're doing such and such. We're starting to slow down. Is there anything you need to do?" Right. So this is kind of like the perfect year, time of year where they're slow, so then they offer shit for services. And a lot of times they may not know how to do it in the beginning, but thanks to YouTube and everything else, like you can easily learn it. Whereas fence companies, stuff like that, we don't do that, right? So that's where we need to start looking at a few things. One, we need to know that there's more than enough business. Like I know there is, right? And the reason why I know this is because there's keyword tools, talked about this before, but you can literally go and find out how many times people are searching for different things. Well, it's starting. But there's like, hopefully countdown. Okay. So I think it's recording. But there's like 5,000 people a month that look for fences, right? There's enough work out there. Now, but things are changing, personally, people like, especially when COVID hit, when there was all this free money and everything else, like you could just charge whatever, and people were just booking it because like they were, stuck home, they didn't care, right? And like that extra $400 and $500 a month, well, they looked at it like, well, I'm going to make an extra $5,000 a year. So even if this company's $2,000 more, like I'm kind of ahead. Like, and they may not thinking that out loud, but behind the scenes, like behind their head, subconsciously, they are, right? Because money's not an issue. Think about like how your spending is during the springtime, spring or whenever your peak season is. Think about how you spend money compared to like the wintertime when like way less money's coming in. It's completely different. Like I would have no problem spending 10 grand on something stupid in the summertime when there's like ridiculous amounts of money coming in. But I'm not going to do that in the wintertime, right? Is it the right thing to do? No. Am I a moron with my money sometimes? 100%. But so are the people that you're dealing with, right? So we need to look at what we can do. So if you're in the fence industry, or it doesn't really matter, if you're doing these high ticket items, just know that one, like you might not book as many jobs, right? That's number one. Two, there's people that still have money. So you need to go find those people. One of the best ways is advertising. So, and the great part about advertising in a recession is, like I just said about me spending money in the wintertime, I'm less likely to do it. Well, same thing when the shit's hitting the fan, people are way less likely to spend money on advertising. What does that mean? Well, that means instead of spending, $5 per click, well, now you're spending like $3 per click. That doesn't sound great. But that could mean, before it might cost you $300, $400, $500 to get a customer, or 200, whatever. Well, now it might only cost you like $75 or $100. So your money goes way further, right? Things to remember with the advertising is, one, you don't really want to just hire an outside agency to do it. One, they don't know what the hell they're doing. It's not your money on the line. It just doesn't matter. This stuff, at the end of the day, it's pretty simple when it comes down to it. Google, like literally pretend you are your own customer, and what would you search in Google, right? You're typing in, like, I'm typing in fence company near me. How much does the deck cost? How much is the vinyl fence? Like all that kind of stuff. Well, you show up for those words, and like, you talk to the people. Like it's pretty simple, right? So that's one thing you do. The other thing to realize as well, when you're doing the advertising or any kind of advertising, whether it's online advertising, direct mail advertising, door-to-door advertising, like whatever it is, realize where your target customers are. So, you may go to a certain area because it's very populated. You can hit a lot of areas at once. But are they your target customer? Whereas you might be better suited, like for my area, there's there's Haddonfield, right? So it's higher income than anywhere else in the area, way higher. It's where people go. And like for a house there that costs $1 million, the same house in like my town that's like 15 minutes over, it's like $300,000. It's like 3, 4, 5 times more expensive there, right? And they have the money. Not only that, but they're more likely to spend the money because they want to look like they. Which drives me insane. So that's something to look at as well. But the other thing is, like, can you start adding on additional services? Like, this is not something I would normally advocate. Like, I normally say, like, you really should stick to like what you're really good at and focus hard and deep on that, right? But there may be a time where you can't just rely on the number of leads, the leads you have coming in. Like you may not book enough jobs. So is there something complementary that you can do instead? And one of the big things for fencing is staining, right? And there's a lot of different marketing that can be done with this, as far as, it's basically like getting a new fence for like 80% less. I don't know the exact numbers for staining, but if a fence is going to cost $10,000, you might be able to stain it for $3,000 or whatever after, materials and labor, making 50%, profit. So you might even turn $1,500. I don't know the exact numbers, but if you can charge $3,000, $2,000, whatever, well, it's like getting the fence for 80% less, 60% less, like whatever it may be, right? And the thing about the staining is it's part of that holy grail system of reoccurring revenue. I ran the numbers a while ago, so I don't know the exact numbers offhand, but like over the long term, for the next, like, not like, it's not the short term, but over the 20 and 30 year time period, this traffic is ridiculous. Over the 20, I don't even know what's going on. But over the 20, 20 and 30 years, you're going out to stain their fence like every 3 years. So you might go out there 10 times, right? Well, if you're only making, 500 bucks each time, well, 10 times it's $5,000. As opposed to that one fence, you might only make 1,500 bucks. It might be 3 times more profitable. This is how landscapers make their money. you know it's just, and they're doing it off a long cut. So if they can do, if they can have a pretty great, existence based on $50 long cuts, we should be able to do it too, right? So it's things to look at. And I really do think, like, if I was to start this all over again, I'd start a landscaping company. 100%. Like, because how easy is it to sell people into $40 and $50, programs, weekly programs? It's easy. People are lazy. There's so many different things you can do. I was watching a YouTube video, because people are really lazy. Even though they don't have any money, like, they're still really lazy, right? We're not going back to the 1950s at any point in time where, like, they're cooking all their own crap and, everything else. Like, they're still paying people to do it. There's still things that are valuable to them, right? And so there's this one laundromat service that it's a pretty much a done for you. Instead of going in there and doing your clothes, like, one, they wash them, right, and two, they're folded and everything else. So, like, people are paying for this stuff, and because of stuff like that, they were able to separate themselves, and it's multi-million-dollar programs. So people, they're still lazy, right? They still don't have the time. They're still working a lot, that kind of thing. So that's something we can look at, right? So again, if there's anything that you can do within your business, what can you add on, right? And it could be anything, for fence, obviously, like I said, it's the staining. Can you get into decks? I personally don't want to get into decks, but that's something else you can get into. And could there be other things? Yeah, you could, if you start the staining, then you might have the equipment for the power washing. The power washing I really don't enjoy, just because, like, we've tried it and I didn't go long enough, but it does take a lot of setup, and, like, you're not really making that much money off of the job just because everyone does it now, at least in this area. Um, and then the other thing you can start doing is working with other companies. I think this is the main thing that holds a lot of companies back. It's what held me back too. Like, after looking at a lot of things, I was able to build up the business. We got up to $2 million, and it's successful. But and that's off of closing at 7%. Well, the reason why we have most of those issues is because I rely heavily on advertising, right? Heavily on advertising with a low skilled sales team, right? And which is a really bad thing to be in, because what's happening with the advertising is we're first people that they typically talk to. We don't do a great job on the sales process, and then they go and talk to other people, and we're 10 grand and they're 8 grand, so they just go with them, right? So if we would have built more relationships with other contractors, builders, stuff like that, well, what ends up happening is those people are basically selling for you. Like, hey, use this company. They're really good at what they do. And even if you're more money, you can talk about that, right? And they're more likely to go with you. But the other thing is, like, they, besides the giving, referrals and things like that, there's other things you can do. You can incentivize this stuff as well. Like, hey, if you refer my business, I will give you X amount. Like, whatever it may be. If you're doing fences, if you want to keep it nice and simple, like, look, I'm going to give you, for any projects over whatever, I'll give you, X amount. If it's under this, then I'll give you like $100, something like that. And, it works, right? There's a reason why these big companies, and that's what I think a lot of contractors need to do, is